Okay. Thank you all for coming. We want to call our meeting to order and recognize that we are holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Hoopachesit and Sechot First Nations. Are there any late items, councillors? None. Any late items from the city clerk?
Just one, Madam Mayor, and it's under reports F 6.1. It's a letter from the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations.
Okay. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda with the late item?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any questions on the agenda? All in favor? Carried. And adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 6 p.m. on November 26, 2018. Minutes from the regular meeting of council held at 7 p.m. on November 26, 2018. And minutes from the special meeting of council held at 4:30 p.m. on December 3rd, 2018. Would somebody like to move approval?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, that brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak for up to 3 minutes. Ellen first.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ellen Frood with Alberni Community Women's Services Society, and I am here with the latest in toque wear. Coldest night of the year. Madam Mayor and members of council is coming, and I again am encouraging you to put a team together along with members of city staff, fire, and whomever else you can garner support from. So I've brought you your very own toques. Yay! Yes. If I may approach.
Mm-hmm.
Block heaters, right?
Alberni Blue Dogs.
That's right. Thank you.
Alberni Blue Dogs.
Thank you.
Looking for a team name.
Yes.
Almost needed an I in there almost. It looks like it says my name almost. Sort of.
Pretty close.
To our lovely city staff, and also
That commits you to being a part of our team.
Who's going to put theirs on?
So if you're so inclined to put your hats on, I'm happy to promote our city staff and council staff That's it. And I have to take a couple. Come on, Dan, you can do it. I need to do more than one. I can work my way around the room.
I like your blue pom-pom.
Nice. Drinking water. So good news is I can't see what I'm doing, so you never know what it looks like. So coldest night of the year takes place on the 23rd of February. Included with your lovely hats are some easy tips on how to recruit people to a team. We would love to have support from the city and a team, and so please join us on the 23rd. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Before you go, do you want to just quickly talk about what coldest night of the year does for ACAUSE? Just for a moment.
Reminder. It's a small detail, of course. It supports Alberni Community Women's Services, our programs and services in support of women and kids impacted by domestic violence. And in particular, 2 programs that keep people out of the cold. One, our Transition House, which is an 11-bed shelter for women and their children, and our drop-in center up on 3rd Avenue.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And we are planning to put in a team. We're just trying to think of a catchy name. And Chris Washington next.
Blue dogs, you said. Blue dogs.
What shoes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Councillors. I just wanted to take a moment. I wasn't able to be here for the last meeting where retail cannabis was discussed, and I would just like to bring a couple of points forward that I need council to consider. We have, for the past 2.5 years, shared an entryway with a medical marijuana dispensary, supposedly. One of the issues has been for us, it has not been a problem. We'd be more than thrilled to have another retail cannabis store on 3rd Avenue. I think it's the reality of the future. However, I think what two things council would need to consider is that a cannabis retail outlet should have individual entry. The fact that we have had to share an entry with a cannabis retailer for the last 2.5 years has caused some of my customers issues, those that are allergic, can't stand the smell, those types of things. And also that any cannabis retailer needs to have proper ventilation. Because of that, that also caused that issue. We, as I said, they never caused a problem with us. Their customers never caused a problem. It worked out well. Just that specific issue, and since they have been closed, because they closed voluntarily before the October 17th deadline, my customers have certainly noticed the difference and have passed on the comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Come on up, Keith.
Thank you. So, Keith Ambrose, I spoke at the last meeting, and I was going to speak at the last meeting, and I canceled out last minute. I had a complaint, and I've since dealt with the staff, and I'm quite satisfied staff's got my complaint under control. So, but I wanted to comment on what happened last meeting. An item came up, and you asked some questions, or City Council asked some questions, and you put it off for consideration. So I that's really worked out in this case because it has to do with some of my complaint. So I was a little bit worried when I watched it, and if it wouldn't have gone and been reconsidered, then we would take some time to reconsider it in a couple of years. So I'm just glad that the City Council is willing to ask questions and willing to maybe put something off for 2 weeks to have a better look at it. And I think that's really important, and I'm glad it happened in this instance. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? All right. Thank you for that. That brings us to item D, delegations, and the first one up is Cermak Canada.
Well, thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for having us here tonight. I don't know if you need that or not, do you? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Television camera.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, we were just, we really don't have anything specific we want to ask you tonight or anything like that. It's actually a way of introduction. So we know we have new people on council, and we've certainly had a change in management at Cermak. So I'm here with our new managing director, David Kimmel. Relatively new to the role myself, Linda Sams. I'm the director of sustainable development, and we have our area production manager, Eric Jensen, for Tofino. And the reason that Cermak has an interest in Port Alberni, or Port Alberni should have an interest in Cermak, is we actually have our hatchery facility here in the Port Alberni Valley, and we also have quite a few different businesses, and quite a few of our employees are actually from Port Alberni, which Dave Kimmel will talk about a bit more. And I think the piece that I wanted to, and I'm mindful we only have 10 minutes, so again, just way of introduction, we're more than a salmon farm, salmon farming company, though Dave will talk about that. The reason I provided you this slide is that we're doing a lot of work nationally, locally, and internationally on some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically this is an area where I have expertise. We're doing a lot of work around climate action, climate preparedness. We're working on the Indigenous rights and development aspect of it. We work in partnership with the Howsett First Nation, and obviously you can read the others yourself, but the big one for us is we're the first corporation globally to sign to the UN Oceans Platform. And I just think that as we move forward as a company here in British Columbia, there may be areas that we can actually assist or provide leadership or become more involved with local governments on these issues, above and beyond, the salmon farming and the economic aspect of that. So anyhow, thank you for listening tonight, and I'll pass it over.
Thanks, Linda. Just put this up a little bit. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. Just to reiterate Linda's comments, thank you for the time to come in and just say hello. My name's David Kimmel. I'm the Managing Director for Cermak Canada. Been in the industry for 19 years here and also in Tasmania, but have returned to the island to take up a position with Cermak and love being back on the island. Just Cermak globally, just so you're aware, second largest producer of farmed salmon in the world, approaching 200,000 tons of global production in Chile, Norway, and here in Canada. Canada makes up only approximately about 15% of our overall volume, but very important to the business. Here in British Columbia, we have fantastic access to the Pacific markets and also the United States, which from a seafood consumption point of view is one of the largest emerging markets and the largest importer of fresh seafood basically in the world. And I thought I'd just touch on some of the facts and figures that you see up behind you there. We have a lot of people that are living in Port Alberni that actually work on our sites. Just an average or a number, of total annual salaries of the current employees living here in Port Alberni is just over $2 million. We have seasonal plant employees that we bus in from Port Alberni and also from the Ahousaht First Nation that are living here in town, and that accounts to about $640,000 a year of salary. And then when you factor the seasonal people working full-time hours in the summer, along with the full-time people that are there year-round, almost $2.65 million in wages here in the Alberni Valley. We also talk about total package. We have company paid benefits. We have fantastic benefits when it comes to medical, dental, and we also have RRSP matching programs. So you can see when we add all that up, we're just shy of 2.9 million coming into the local economy, which is, I think, a significant number. We have Boot Lagoon, which Linda alluded to earlier, produces about 25% of the fish that we send to sea. We actually have a project up for approval for our next financial year, which runs from April 1st to March 31st for a $10 million upgrade to our facility at Boot Lagoon, which would see the facility able to produce another 1.5 million fish. So it's a very important facility for our business now and also moving forward. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Solda?
Just kind of curious, what's the staffing level with your company?
We have 270 full-time employees.
And from the Alberni Valley?
There would be approximately, there's probably about 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my comment is, do you have issues finding staff?
Yeah, I mean, finding staff is a challenge, especially when we operate in fairly remote areas. I mean, Eric can speak to this as well, but I mean, Tofino, there's a very small labor pool to draw from there. It's quite seasonal and transient in nature. We actually have people that come in every day during our processing season. We're running full time that bus in. They leave Port Alberni at 5 in the morning and sometimes get home at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Most of the hatchery staff live here in town. And then we do have people that live in town that also work on our sea sites on the east coast of the island, where the work is camp-based. So you're in there for a week at a time. So you can basically live where you'd like, so to speak, on the island and still maintain the job out in the sea sites.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Paulson?
I hate to be, I guess the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. Where is Boot Lagoon?
Boot Lagoon is on Great Central Lake.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it's out by Robertson Creek Fish Hatchery. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Corbeil?
Just a question, David. Where are the salmon farms located?
We have 14 marine sites in Ahousaht territory in Clayoquot Sound on the west coast. We've got 3 sites that are located in the Discovery Islands outside of Campbell River, and then 5 sites that are located in the Broughton Archipelago.
Councillor Paulson?
Well, fish farms are in the crosshairs, right?
I'd say we're in a time of opportunity.
Just maybe you'd like to make a comment on best practices and where you guys are maybe trendsetters there. And
Yep.
I mean, we went to a meeting the other night and there were comments made about fish farming and,
Yep.
and the environment and that sort
Yep.
of thing. So I'd like to hear the other side of the story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, and I meant what I said when I said in a you know, time of opportunity. I think the industry is refreshing itself. We want to be more out in the public and tell our story so others don't have to tell it for us. CERMAC operates under what is deemed to be the highest global third-party certification when it comes to salmon production, was the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. It was put together part and parcel with the World Wildlife Federation. Our goal is to have all of our sites certified just past 2020, and it's a global initiative as well too. And then obviously the pieces that Linda spoke to as well earlier, with the connections with the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, and more so the Sustainable Development Goals. That's a global platform that we're signed on to and committed to operating to those standards.
That's great.
Yep, I might just add.
Yes, please.
And if anybody wants to learn any more about it on our website, we have a very transparent reporting structure, and once a quarter have full sustainability reporting and lots of information there. So it's just www.cermac.com. So easy to find.
I got one more question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just keep on going.
It's good.
Just stuff out here.
Yeah.
What's your feeling on land-based operation?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. All of our fish start on land. Okay, so we operate Boot Lagoon. We also have a hatchery at Duncan Ocean Farms. We have a hatchery in north of Campbell River called Little Bear Bay. And then we have a broodstock facility where we do grow fish from start to finish at Fanny Bay. So our feeling on land-based is that it's part of the answer. We're about supplying and growing sustainable protein. And moving forward, the demand for that is only increasing. The pressure on wild stocks is not going to diminish. There's a place for both aspects in our business moving forward. We're actually involved in a technical review coming up with DFO. The industry will be heavily engaged with a review on land solutions, but also semi-closed containment, which is new technology that happens on the sea sites as well too. So a lot of activity in that space.
Yeah. And just as I was saying, it's an area of expertise for me. What we're looking at now, especially with BC's announcement about low carbon economy, right now with salmon farming or farming the ocean in general, is you do have protein that's produced at a low carbon expense. So we are the lowest carbon footprint protein, all other farmed protein. So we don't want to lose that for intensive industrial farming on land. So we have to find a middle ground somewhere. And some of the conversations that we've had with the province and with the federal government is that Atlantic salmon is the infrastructure, the backbone, which all other aquaculture will grow off of. So we need to be mindful that we don't throw away the marine environment in farming the oceans, because I do believe that is going to be critical for food security for Canada, especially when we have such opportunity here. So it is a complicated question that should be discussed often. So thanks for asking. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, Councillor Haggard, Councillor Poon.
Can you comment on the relationship between wild salmon and farm salmon?
Yeah, sure. It's a
Yeah. So the most I think striking relationship is that all the farm salmon that we raise in BC is far outnumbered by wild salmon. So wild salmon are far more numerous than any of our farm salmon. So what we need to make sure, all other things equal, is that we're not causing any risk to wild salmon. It's everybody's responsibility that wild salmon flourish in British Columbia. And so CERMAC takes that very seriously, and one of the missions that we have going forward is that actually wild salmon will be in a better position if there's CERMAC farms in the area, and we're doing that through, obviously we can't have risk, we can't create risk for them, but on top of it we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in restoration. We're working on joint enhancement projects. We have marine biologists, veterinarians. We're like the wild salmon army out there because we are in all these areas with all this capacity and expertise, and we're really going to start turning our efforts and our minds to doing that, so that we're adding more value to the community than just jobs in the salmon farming. So we think wild salmon come first as well. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate you bringing information and introducing yourself. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, and our second delegation is Pam Craig to talk about the secret path.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. It's a great opportunity for me to fill you in on something that's very special, and I would consider a coup for Port Alberni. I had the good fortune of seeing this presentation at a provincial gathering of trustees last year. And I spoke to the gentleman right afterwards and said, "You've got to come to Port Alberni. I want our students to hear your story." And that man was Mike Downey. So the title of our event will be The Road to Reconciliation. And in support of reconciliation and to create an awareness amongst our community, this opportunity is an experience given by a well-known and celebrated storyteller. So I'll tell you a wee bit about Mike Downey. Mike Downey is the co-founder of the Gord Downey and Chani Wenjack Fund, which aims to inspire Canadians to walk a path of reconciliation and help bring together Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. A celebrated storyteller, Mike takes his audience on a ride that explores how our stories define us as individuals and as a nation. Mike shares memories of growing up in a small town outside Kingston with his brother Gord, who was, of course, Gord Downey from the Tragically Hip. Although the two have very different careers, at heart, they both believed that storytellers are so important, as do our First Nation in our area as well. It's my hope, he says, that in hearing our story, you recognize the beauty and power of your own, and how the intersections of our stories are what frame the experience and future of our country. Now, Mike talks about the story of Chani Wenjack, who was an Ojibwe boy who was at residential school, and he was desperate to be home with his family, and he left that school to try and find his way home, and he didn't make it. He died on the way home. And I feel that's an important story that will relate to our students at that age. He would be about 12 or 13, and this happened in the mid-60s. It's not that long ago. So our purpose is to bring Mr. Downey to the community. He'll present 3 presentations to the senior students of School District 70, including our West Coast senior students. And then the next evening, he will have a public performance, and we will invite the community to come and see that presentation. And at the same time, he will have an opportunity for a question and answer period. It so happens it coincides with our fall Vancouver Island School Trustees meeting, so we will have probably 80 or so trustees here from around all of Vancouver Island as well, so they'll be attending that evening. This is going to happen in October. He'll present to students on October 24th, and then come for the evening of the 25th, which is a Friday evening. And this past week or so, we were away at meetings in Vancouver, and a number of the superintendents on Vancouver Island are also on out there contacting Mike's booking agent to see if he can also present to different districts on the island, including Victoria. 2 districts in Victoria, Souk, Victoria, and Nanaimo are already trying to see that he makes this trip all the way to the West Coast and then also presents to those students as well. So what I'm asking for from council is, of course, to support this. Buy a ticket when they come out. They'll be very reasonable. We'll make sure you get lots of notices to when they'll be available, and attend this presentation. I understand the city also has a reconciliation committee, and if you give me the information, I will certainly attend that committee meeting and present the information to them as well. And in the interim, I am hoping to get support from all of the community. So this is really a truly community event. So that, for example, the Alberta District Teachers Association already have stepped forward. The District Parent Advisory Council has stepped forward. And I have a number of letters circulating around the community to various groups. And I apologize for the lateness of my application for the Community Investment Program, but I could not present it or talk about it until the final contracts had been signed. So, and that came, I think, 2 days after the deadline. So I do have an application in for some support from that fund. So I'm hoping that when that committee gets together that they will take a look. And I hope that councillors will recommend to them that this is a very good project. So this is the vision that I'm sure many of you have seen. And this is the large book. Hopefully we'll have some copies available at that event. And any questions you might have, I can answer.
Thank you. I'll just comment for the Reconciliation Committee first. I'm the co-chair of our committee, so our next meeting isn't until January. But one of the recommendations that's actually coming forward as part of our final report that will be soon is for the recommending to the city that they create a separate fund or fund like the community investment program that would be specifically to support reconciliation events. So this is too, soon for that, but I think you're really on the same page. We want to see more opportunities for events like this being held in the community. So thanks for taking the initiative on this.
Right. I think we're on a long walk together. So I think this is one of those kinds of events that will help share that information for the community.
For
so
sure.
Thank you.
Councillor, are there any questions? Right. No questions. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. All right. And our final delegation is from the Uptown Merchants Association.
Sorry for having to see my face a third time.
We're pleased to have you here.
Madam Mayor, councillors, and I apologize. I'm basically going to be reading this. This is the busiest time of year for me in the retail, so I haven't had a real time to memorize this or be prepared. My apologies. The reason we're here to speak to you tonight is to reiterate to the new council need for movement on items that were brought forth to the City Council earlier in the year. In attendance at our own meetings, as well as regular attendance at the Southport Community Group, Southport Proud Community Group, there are several issues that still need to be addressed in our area. I'm going to start with lighting. Oh, this is terrible. My apologies. Carol Ann with me tonight. It's Carol Ann Phillips from Forever New and KJ Riggins.
Yes.
Did I get that right? I always do JK. And Ellen Frood from ACAUS. And they're both going to help me with the presentation tonight. Oh boy. So the lighting at night on 3rd Avenue from Argyle to Mar is still terrible. When we requested to turn on the lights in the trees earlier in the fall because it started getting dark so late, we were advised that they would not be turned on until after November 11th in observance of Remembrance Day because they were colored lights and it obviously made people think of Christmas. We also thought that perhaps that if the lights were white, then that would not have been an issue. We would have been able to turn them on earlier. As well, we were advised that the lamp standard bulbs were going to be replaced by brighter LED bulbs. We're not aware if that has happened yet, but it certainly hasn't seemed to be any brighter at this point. There is obviously one block of 3rd Avenue between Argyle to Mar that is much busier and brighter than the other, and the other block certainly suffers for it. This was something that was brought up with the Southport Proud Group because they are all residents in this area. They like to be able to walk at night, look through windows, and they find it feels very uncomfortable and unsafe. It's very much an issue. Traffic. In our previous presentation to Council regarding a traffic circle at the intersection of 3rd and Angus, Council set the issue back to staff for a staff report. We have not seen anything yet on a report, but we do wish you to know that we have looked at many other options over the past months while traveling to different cities. We are no longer set on a traffic circle. That was just a way to open the conversation. But we need to get the large trucks off of 3rd Avenue. We really need to make that happen. If we can only move them even to a temporary route until a permanent route can be found, and change it to a 2-lane street. My husband, Councillor Washington, and I were recently in Red Deer, and They have taken their 2 blocks of their old downtown area and moved their sidewalks, widened their sidewalks. And it's fantastic. You've got all of these neat cafes that can put in the nice weather, put their chairs and their tables outside. It just gives it a real community feel in the area. And I think that would work perfect on the 2 blocks of 3rd Avenue. We had also looked at the boulevard down the center to accomplish this, but I think widening of the sidewalks would be even better. Another thing that was very important to the Southport Proud group was washrooms. There is absolutely no public washrooms on the 3rd Avenue corridor. As a store owner, I'm happy to have people come in, but we close at 5:30 at night, and if they're out walking, there's no opportunity. Now, we did try to garner some information from other municipalities because we were willing to fundraise for this. We understand that there is not unlimited funds, tax funds. And when I made several attempts to contact other municipalities, never received a response. So what we would like to ask council, and I'm hoping this is not going to be a drawn out process for staff because I know they're busy enough. But if somebody could, all we were looking for was to find out a cost for the different types of washrooms so that we know what we're fundraising for. And that's all the questions we were asking. I emailed Victoria, called Victoria, didn't even get a response back because they have some really interesting public washrooms that almost look like a piece of art right out in the middle of their large streets. I'm now going to pass this over to Carol Ann, and she's going to finish off.
Sure. So the other issue that we have is bylaw enforcement. It's not really an issue. We know that there's been several changes in the planning department in previous months. We're looking forward to the bylaw enforcement being taken seriously and the city working with the Business Development Center to increase small businesses in our area as well as throughout the valley. One of my concerns and other merchants' concerns is we have 2 structures uptown that are being used for storage facilities. And it's my understanding that's not what they're bylawed for. So we'd like that to be looked at. They should be accessible for business. We understand that there's a limited budget to spend on the entire valley. However, many of our taxpayers reside or own businesses in Southport, and together we'd like to create a draw for both the locals and tourists in the area with a uniqueness and history. And then there's also 3 new issues that we'd like to bring forward at this time. I think some of them have been dealt with, but I'll talk about them anyway. City Council liaison. Many important groups in the community have a City Council liaison who attends their meetings and reports back to Council. We'd like to have one for our uptown merchants. It's not a huge commitment. The cruise ship group, we are in the understanding that at this time there's a specific group with the cruise ships coming to town next year, and we were surprised to find out that nobody from the uptown area was asked to participate. This is a natural place for tourists. They're going to walk up to our uptown. We're only a few blocks away, and we request that a member of our association be able to sit in on their group. Sorry, I have to flip the page. Another issue, and you probably can't help us with it, but we're still going to talk about it, is AV Chatterbox. As a group, we're doing everything that we can to redirect the negative impact on social media is having in our area. Over and over again, we're seeing and hearing people and customers who are afraid to come to the area to shop. And it is ridiculous. Social media is making us out to be under constant attack from criminal elements, and that's just not the case. We recognize that there's nothing specific that you guys can do, but hoping that, you can help. So basically, thanks for your time. Ellen's going to speak, and yeah.
So I just want to say that while we're not a merchant, we are certainly a part of the fabric on 3rd. And I agree completely with comments about lighting and the importance of that and making it feel welcoming. It is a neighborhood that's in transition. I had a conversation with city staff today about that. We want to see that transition, but we have to make it warm. We have to make it welcoming. And part of that is going to make people feel safer on the streets. As we know, when Power of 3 opened on the corner, all of a sudden there were people walking down the street with yoga mats under their arms. It's like, holy cow, look at that. So I think, the city's invested lots of money and made Johnson Road a priority. And I would really like to make a very strong appeal that the city consider the uptown area equally as important as Johnson, and perhaps even more so at this time. Yeah.
it's very difficult to get the rest of the community on side for development on 3rd Avenue. And I have to be honest, I'm not sure why. I have to tell a very brief story. We were doing our Christmas lights outside of our home last Sunday, and a neighbor came over to us. Actually, it was her father came over to us and said, we just started having a conversation, and he said, and I think that City Council needs to forget about 3rd Avenue, let those businesses die. We shouldn't be spending any more money on there. It's over and done. There are a lot of taxpayers that live on this side of the Alberni Valley. I was so frustrated the other day. So many of our items in our windows right now at this time of the year take batteries. And we had no batteries left. And I stood there and said, where am I going to go to get batteries? And it just seems crazy. You got to get in your car and drive for 7 minutes to get batteries because you have a business on 3rd Avenue. We have to remember that there are taxpayers that live here. And we have new developments going in. People are working really hard, updating old buildings, rejuvenating. People have invested their lives on 3rd Avenue, and we cannot just let it go. We have to come back. We have to invest. We have to make it a great place to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does council have any questions? Councillor Paulson?
I just want to make a comment on cruise ships. There's really no invitation has gone out to, I don't even know how they got my name, but I have gone to a number of their meetings. But there's the water side is part of it. The Port Authority has pretty well got under control and stuff. So there's really going to be a call out for volunteers to help us put together the party, the shoreside excursion party. And I think Bill Collette is heading up that committee. And if you want to volunteer, give him a call, because we're looking for people to get actively involved with lots of energy and yeah. So the next meeting will be in January, and there's kind of a preliminary meeting that was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, but Bill's waiting until after the Christmas season. So, and there'll also be, through the Port Authority, they're going to actually put together a program of cruise ship education that's being offered by I think one of the cruise ship lines from back east or something. They'll actually come in and run a course on what you should do as a community, and so I think that's coming up in the spring too. But yeah,
I appreciate that, Ron. I've actually, since this was written, I'd already had an opportunity to speak to Pat Deacon, and Pat is going to make sure that our request is put forward to Bill Collette. We do have a young lady, Kennedy Wright, that's completely interested, young and vibrant and a go-getter that wants to sit on the committee, so it would be great. I've also spoken to Pat. I come from a different perspective. I've cruised 32 times, and I know what happens when you're the person getting off the ship. So I think that we also, as a community, need that perspective, as opposed to just what do we want to give these people. It's what do these people expect. So,
for sure. Questions? Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May we ask staff where they are with putting in the new LED lights on 3rd Avenue? Because I agree lighting is an issue.
Absolutely. CAO, are you able to comment on that or go back and get an answer?
I can find the answer out and bring it to a subsequent meeting.
Great.
And we'll respond to Ms. Washington sooner.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Any volunteers to be the appointee to, or the liaison? If not, I have an idea. Great, I was going to appoint you, Councillor Poon. So I would move that Councillor Poon be appointed as the liaison to the Uptown Merchants.
I'll second that.
Any questions? And she's willing, even better. All in favor?
she fills right into that spot.
Thank you. So I want to really thank you for coming. We are, I think, as a council and our last council, we're always excited to hear what's going on in the Uptown, but we recognize that a lot more needs to be done. So happy to have you here. And we can't help you with social media as a council, but I would say that to the public, it's really important when things like that are said on social media, that people who don't necessarily always get involved come out and comment and say there's nothing wrong with Uptown. You know, we're not there. It's not dangerous to go shop up there. It takes the rest of the community coming out to say it's a great place. So people really do need to speak up on AV Chatterbox on many issues. So that's just my thing.
Thank you. And yes, people need to realize that when they put information out on social media sites such as AV Chatterbox, it's a reflection out there to the entire world. This is not something that's just being left contained in your own little community. It's out there for everyone to see. So it does not put a good spin on our community when we're infighting, I guess, basically.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more quick note, in case you didn't know, December 20th, we will be having the Christmas in Uptown. So we invite everybody and tell your friends. The stores will be open from 5 till 8. We'll have hot chocolate and goodies, and Santa will be at the Business Development Center. Bring your camera. It'll be a great night for you to come with your families.
Great. Thank you. Okay, that's the end of delegations. Item E, unfinished business, and there is none. On to item F, staff reports. Number 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated December 10, 2018 be received, and checks numbering 142769 to 142855 inclusive, and payments of account totaling $1,109,716.52 be approved.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 2, from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, Community Investment Program 2019 recommendations. Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to bring the entire council up to speed, to increase accessibility of the Community Investment Program, multiple areas of the process were streamlined for this cycle. First of all, we no longer require applicants to attend any workshops before they apply. Secondly, we've digitized the application process, so we no longer need to handwrite application forms and arrive in person to submit your application. And thirdly, we've extended the application deadline to try to get as much of community on board with applying. We've extended it a month, so historically it had been an October 1st deadline. It's now November the 1st. In the 2019 application cycle, we saw an increase from 34 to 41 applications. And this increase in applications includes 2 organizations that hadn't previously applied, and actually 5 late applicants from the 2018 cycle were on time for the 2019 cycle. So it's good to see that progression happening. And lastly, the available dollars for the 2019 cycle were down slightly. So $57,000 were available in 2018, down to $55,100 in 2019. And so what that variance represents is that we utilized some of the reserves in 2018 to support late applications. So,
thank you.
And does council have any questions about the report?
Councillor Paulson.
Do you want to just discuss a little bit, and it's in the report, but just for the public, we know what the budget was, and maybe comment on the total asks?
Absolutely.
So it was a difficult
yes,
process.
and of course, Madam Mayor, Councillor Paulson, speaking from experience as he sits on the committee, that it's a difficult decision-making process. So as the public can see on the board there, that the total requests in 2019 were 113,639 and 21. So well more than double the available budget funds. And those funds do come out of the Parks, Recreation and Heritage annual operating budget. So. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? So I had one just on one that didn't, that applied and didn't get anything. The Alberni Valley Restorative Justice Society, and they had applied for a meeting room space. I just wondered if it was a meeting room that wasn't available, or what the reasoning was on that one.
Yes, so they were a group that had actually a credit account, or credit on account. So the blue shaded that you can see on the page 4 there of the total in kind, any of the blue shaded numbers represent that account has. So I guess it's third from the right-hand side on the screen. So third from the total recommendation. So what that represents is any of the blue shaded do have credits on account. And so what we wanted to ensure is that as opposed to just rolling over funds that sometimes, for instance, with restorative justice, they may not have utilized all previous year funds for meetings. And so so we wanted to include any credits as part of the conversation. So that way we're not sitting with some organizations with a credit that it remains untouched of those CIP funds, and then we're refusing or denying other applicants. So specifically with that group, what that 0 represents is they've got enough of a credit on account that they'll be able to sustain those same meetings in the 2019 year.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Councillor Solda?
Yes, excuse me. Could you tell me what the criteria for the grants are? I know, there's a short synopsis, I'm sure.
Yes, so I think really it comes down to community investment. And so the idea that each organization either needs to hold not-for-profit status or have the ability to hold that. So meaning we don't want to stifle any group that is considered a nonprofit, but they don't happen to have a society number. We don't want to discourage those organizations from applying. So in other granting programs, you're often required to have a society status. What we're saying is that we want to ensure that it's not meant dollars aren't meant to steer toward commercial or for-profit businesses. So those are obviously the main criteria. We also look at scope and scale. So if the purpose of the program is meant to involve the community, we look at what's that impact going to be. So if it's going to be the handful of us in this room versus some major special events, like the Sail Pass that just happened over the weekend that has an impact potentially in the thousands, we want to steer funds toward that. So I would say those are the two main criteria, is that ability to have nonprofit status as well as the scope and community, so that we're ensuring that the dollars we have available, we're able to stretch as much as we can.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Haggard?
This is more of a comment than a question. As somebody who's attended that workshop, I'm very happy you don't have to go anymore. So thank you.
I'll second that.
Yeah, so just to touch on that, Madam Mayor, that I think that the previous director did a great job at getting the community well educated. And also we've looked at, when I mentioned the streamlining the process, is the intent of the funds are to distribute to community. And so as much as we can, how can we streamline the process so that we encourage more applications and to really put more pressure on that budget? And I would say we're quite successful at this stage because, again, the asks are over double the available dollars. So.
Thank you. Would somebody like to make a motion? Where are we pointing?
Yeah.
Councillor Coulson.
Yeah, Councillor Poon. I'd like to move that the report dated November 26, 2018 be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni approve the 2019 Community Investment Program recommendations of the Community Investment Program Committee, contingent on receipt of 2018 final reports from each one of those groups.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Any further questions? All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. And item 3, Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, Recreation Infrastructure Grant.
Yes, so speaking of grant funds, just to, again, educate folks in the room, on September the 12th of 2018, the Canadian British Columbian governments committed up to $134 million toward an initial intake of the Community Culture and Recreation Program, which could be very suitable for a variety of infrastructure updates here in Port Alberni, such as replacement of the Echo 67 Aquatic Center. The Alberni Valley and Bamfield Services Committee carried a motion on November 28 to not submit an application for the first grant intake. And it's of staff's view that in order to continue our commitment to collaborate with the regional district on this initiative, we're recommending that the city submit an application to the initial grant intake for a project other than the Aquatic Center. As far as what the impact, so there's multiple intakes, as I mentioned in my report. if we do submit an application for the initial intake, as far as how it may impact future grant intakes, is hard to say at this stage. So as a municipality, if we were to submit an application, or a regional district either, we may submit one application per intake. So we have to decide on a project, but during each intake, we're welcome to submit an application. At this stage, I'm not sure on timing as far as when the secondary intakes will be, but with the 4 sort of different categories, we're looking in the hundreds of millions of dollars still available even after this initial 134.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Okay, Councillor Paulson.
Do we have a project in mind for the application? Well, don't be afraid to ask.
Madam Mayor, we're at a staff level working right now. So with the a little bit to do, of course, with the timing. So, of course, with the election and now new mayor and council and boards getting comfortable and oriented, it's tricky to pull together an application in this short of a time span. The application is due mid-January. So the short answer is yes, staff are aiming to look at a dry land project, you could say, that is not related to the aquatic center, and our hope is to submit.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Corbeil?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, the region of Bamfield did not want to submit, but where's the rest of the regional district? Beaufort, Cherry Creek, Sprout Lake, Beaver Creek?
Great question. So, Madam Mayor, the AV Bamfield Services Committee does comprise the regional district, and so what that means is that the AV Bamfield Committee put forth a motion that will be on the December 12th regional district agenda. So I'm talking about things that haven't even occurred yet, since the regional district's meeting isn't till the 12th. And at that time, the regional district will decide as a whole if they choose to forego the first intake, or if they wish to submit a report. So all of the entire district will be included on the vote on the 12th.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, myself and Councillor Solda, as well as Councillor Paulson and Councillor Haggard, were at the meeting with the Alberni Valley Bamfield Committee, and I think both of us commented that it's really difficult to have the opportunity for funding for an aquatic centre and to be not submitting a grant application. But we really, as a valley, are not ready, unfortunately, and it was quite clear through the comments that although we might feel like we've been working on this project for a long time and the community's been engaged, and I think somewhat we feel like that includes regional people who live in the regional district. The regional district directors really don't feel like they have been engaged yet. So it's disappointing to be passing up an opportunity. But I think if we want to partner with the regional district on this project, we need to hold ourselves back and engage them and make sure that all parties are ready before we move forward. Did you want to add anything to that, Councillor Solda?
And just at the ACRD meeting, just to say to everybody, there's a 10-year rollout. It's supposed to be for this grant program. That's what has been stated by the CAO and the recommendation on there. And also, we want to do more on the ACRD. They want to do more dialogue, more discussion. They also want the public to be really engaged in this project. So it's not just going to, here's what you got, and this is really important. And they need to engage their areas, and I'm talking about Sprout Lake and the Beaufort, all the regional district areas. So it's really important in that discussion. They've also asked the city to do a $3,000 to put $3,000 for the workshop, since it is our project to start with, although we want to be part with the regional district. So there's a lot more to it, and it's not going to happen overnight. And recognizing that we might not have 11 years left at our pool, and we need to do something. So this is going to be very important. But we could have 11 years. We don't know at this point. I know there's been a lot of issues through the past and a lot of maintenance that has had to be done with the equipment and everything. But we're not just going to rush into a project. We want to really work on this and make it right. So that's my report.
Councillor Paulson?
And I understand the reticence to apply for the grant. And really, the bottom line, the grants that are basically shovel-ready are the ones that get, first blush. And we're nowhere near that. I mean, there are some conceptual designs around from 4 or 5 years ago, but we need to take that to the general public, get public input, and then when we're ready, we're ready.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, as Mayor Minion stated, we're not in the position to apply for a grant for our aquatic center yet, but I think it's really important that we do try and take advantage of a project so we can get that money. They did say it's a 10-year rollout, but if we get a new government, that may not be the case. So I think it's important that we do take advantage of something and do something really important for our community. So thank you for being on top of that.
And would somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a
Second,
seconder?
Madam Mayor.
Any further questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 4 from the Director of Finance, the Audit Committee report. Would somebody like to make the motion before we get started? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the minutes of the November 26th Audit Committee, the responses to questions arising from that meeting dated August 13, 2018, the quarterly analysis of mayor and council travel and convention expenses ending September 30, 2018, financial statements ending September 30, 2018, the vendor check registry report ending November 15th, 2018 be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And are there any questions on the report? Councillor Paulson?
Who else?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just for the public and just for some clarity, there's a line in the in that report that lists regional recreation at $77,947. That's that would be a revenue line, and maybe just a quick explanation of where that fund comes from and kind of how we arrive at that figure.
Well, the regional district provides that, and so much is allocated from Cherry Creek, so much from Beaver Creek, so much from Bamfield, Sprout Lake, yeah. And I believe it's based on population. I don't have the complete breakdown, but that was the total of it.
I just have to clarify.
Yeah. Does that clarify for it? Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the Audit Committee report? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 5 from the Director of Finance, investment policy revision. Do you want to give us just an overview of the change?
Sure, Madam Mayor. The original investment policy statement was written in 2014, and there have been a lot of changes since then. A lot of newer credit unions and that offer a lot of really attractive investment options have developed and been subject to much more rigorous, rigorous rules. And when in 2014, we didn't include credit unions rated at R-1 as the same as the money market funds, which are completely safe. So it's just a bit of housekeeping for the investment policy. It adds just a phrase that says, and credit unions that are fully insured by the Credit Union Deposit Insurance Corporation or the Credit Union Deposit Guarantee Corporation. So we're not adding any risk. We're just adding a little bit more opportunity for our brokers to be able to get us a better return.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? I have one. Who do you normally write the investment policy, or do we have an outside person who does that when it was done in 2014?
Yeah, I did a fair amount of research and then put it together, looked at other municipalities, plagiarized some. We do that.
There's value in that.
Yeah, municipalities will often trade policy wordings, especially if someone has a really good one.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, would somebody like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion, Madam Mayor. that the report from the Director of Finance dated December 4th, 2018 be received and council for the City of Port Alberni adopt the revised investment policy as presented.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 6 from the Chief Administrative Officer, the Log Pond Dam at McLean Mill. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With my report, I am asking council to allocate funds for the Log Pond Dam project underway at McLean Mill. A little bit of background for you. The city owns McLean Mill National Historic Site. The historic site includes what's known as a log pond. It's a reservoir of water retained by a dam, a concrete dam with covered in earth. And in 2014, the city undertook some work to repair that dam, bolster that dam. We diverted the stream away from the log pond to make it less susceptible to overtopping. And at that time, we recognized, it was known that there was some more remedial work to be done on the dam. That work was not undertaken. This summer, early fall, one of the volunteer group tenants at McLean Mill undertook some of that work, and in dewatering the pond, there was a water quality issue arose, and it alarmed downstream neighbors. And as a result, the city took over the project and has been managing the project since. So the water has been restored to the dam. It's now flowing again, and so now we know that there's some remedial work to be done on the dam still. And also, as part of taking over that project, we undertook some soil and water sampling in the log pond to see if there were quality issues, water quality issues. And we found that there were some concerns with the water, and one soil sample had some concerns as well. As a result, we're doing further testing of soil and water in the log pond. So all of that costs money, and we've got a number of consultants working for us. I haven't got an exact cost on money allocated to date. I estimate that's in the neighborhood of $50,000, and there's going to be further costs. So what I'm asking is that council consider allocating the full amount of our contingency budget line in the 2018 budget. That's $200,000. Now the city has the contingency budget line for situations like this that are essentially unforeseeable. Not just projects that we decide to undertake during the year, projects or issues that we could not have foreseen, so emergencies. And this fits that category. We are weeks away from the end of the fiscal year. That budget line has not been used yet this year, so there's $200,000 remaining. I request that council allocate that $200,000 specifically to the dam and water quality and soil issues to do with the log pond. That will enable us to pay the bills that we've incurred already, to continue to pay some of the bills that we will incur, and going into 2019, we'll be able to propose some dam remediation projects that can draw from that fund as well. So maybe I should stop talking and let council ask questions.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two questions, actually. First question, I guess, on everybody's mind is what would happen if we don't do anything? And my second question would be the work that would be performed out at the mill, would that be done by City Works crew, or would that be done by somebody else?
So if council does not allocate any money, we still incur the cost, so we're still going to pay the bills, quite frankly. But the money should be allocated from the budget. So if we don't do any further work, I think we're going to be told to do further work. There's a late item on the agenda from the dam inspector, rather politely telling us that we've messed up multiple times and we need to get our act together to do with the dam. And if we don't take action through the right process, applying for permits to do the work, we're going to be told to do it. So I don't think it's avoidable, to be honest. We either repair the dam or we remove the dam or something, mitigate the risk that's there. As far as the water quality and soil issues, I think those are valid concerns for downstream neighbors, and valid concerns for anybody who spends time on site. And I think it's now that we're aware of those issues, we have to see them through to the end. So I don't see that there's an option there. As far as who's going to do the work, the collective agreement with our CUPE, with CUPE, who represents the majority of our employees, specifically excludes the McLean Mill site from the bargaining unit work. So we tend not to use our own resources out there. The thinking was that we could access volunteer resources as much as possible on that site, which we do a lot of, actually. So I wouldn't think that that would be work that the city would undertake directly. We do use our people to do some water testing and to do some kind of oversight work there, but I don't think that you'd see city works crews out there dredging or digging or building. Not at this point, anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard?
Thank you. It says in 2014 there were some recommendations made for improvements to the dam. Can you explain why those improvements haven't been completed to date?
I can tell you that in 2014, the dam project was fairly contentious even then, whether we should do the work that we did. And again, we didn't have a choice. So we had some dam failures and in terms of overtopping. And so it wasn't really an option for us. We were being pushed there by the province. The engineer who designed the repair work also advised that we do some extra work. So not some extra, some other, basically there's a few voids in the dam where there's log cribbing under which water can flow. And that's, I guess in the dam inspection world, they don't like that. They don't want portions of dam that can rot or fail. So it doesn't meet engineering standards. So they want those portions removed and rebuilt. So that was the engineer's recommendation. We never brought forward, to my knowledge, any further projects out there and never sought funding from 2014 till now. And I could be wrong on that. It could be that earlier we did bring those forward, but I don't recall them coming forward.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson?
I'm probably just reiterating the obvious, but on page 105 in the agenda here, from DR Clough Consulting, they list quite a number of sources that there may be funding available, and I would take it for granted that we're going to investigate all of those to offset these costs and try and garner funding from where we can. It's actually in the last two paragraphs on page 105 there, but they talk about the Green Municipal Fund. I think there's a fisheries fund in there somewhere. Pacific Salmon Community Salmon Fund, Royal Bank Blue Water, just a few of them. So I would hopefully think that we would be going after some of that if it's available.
So we haven't yet made an application for funding, and Clough & Associates are working for us as a consultant. When we get back our next batch of testing, our hope is that we would invite Dr. Hassel back here to interact with council and basically interpret those results for us. And if there's remedial work to do, we think that'll be the time to make an application. That's our kind of plan at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
I've just come back with laryngitis, so that's why I'm doing this. Anyways, my question is volunteer insurance. The people who were working on the dam, do they not have insurance that they could tap in, like a group insurance for all this work?
I mean, in terms of, could the city sue the volunteer organization?
Well, you don't sue, but could they not go to their insurance and say, this is what we did, the damage we did, could we put a claim to it? And what about us, too, on top of that?
I'm not aware if the volunteer organization has insurance that would cover that, and we could ask that, and we have not asked that question yet. And we could also pursue them in a legal sense, I guess. But I don't know if that would make a lot of sense for the city to do. They were certainly well-intentioned undertaking the work, and nobody expected that the result would be what it was. In terms of insurance covering the volunteers, the city provides insurance to cover the liability of volunteers, to protect them, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the city? Because McLean's Mill belongs to the city. Mm-hmm. So is there insurance to cover anything like that kind of damage that happened?
We haven't inquired. We will inquire with our insurer. I really doubt that they would insure this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. like, I believe that McLean's Mill, and I've talked to the mayor about this, we have some serious issues and we need to talk about that. And this is not the only thing. There's lots of other things that are happening. And I really am hesitant without knowing more of their operational costs and everything, and seeing in the last 4 years, I haven't seen all the documentation and how the committee is struck, and I need to learn a lot more. I do have a question on the dam too. Is there a health risk to the public, the general public at the moment, for drinking water? I mean, obviously we could have drinking water in bottles and stuff like that, but I'm just want to know more.
That's the question, isn't it? Is there a health risk to people downstream? So when we first were made aware of this, we immediately the next morning we had city staff knocking on doors of all of the homes that we felt the properties backed onto the creek, and advised them not to drink from the water from the creek or from wells near the creek. And we've been in touch with them since then as well. So nobody should be drawing water from any surface water, any creek, but certainly this one we've advised people not to. But we owe it to the neighbors to see this through to the end to make sure there's not a health risk.
And what about the wildlife in that? Would they be at risk too, or is that just a different species?
The water, well, again, that's a concern for neighbors, and that's something that we need to do further sampling so we can say emphatically that there's not a risk to livestock, for example. And if there is, then we'll have to consider some mitigation steps.
Okay, and there's no point in, just one more question, no point in waiting until we get the letter from parks or from the government saying you have to fix this, you have no choice?
Well, there's two issues here that will cost us money. One is the water quality issue and the soil quality issue. So if there's contaminants in the water that are impacting the environment or livestock or people downstream, then we're likely going to have to take some steps to mitigate that. Likewise, if there's soil issues in the lagoon that are impacting water, we'll likely have to take steps to repair that. Those are completely separate from the dam issue. And the dam inspector, for example, wants us to repair the dam, provide some documentation on how we're going to operate the dam, and demonstrate that the city's actually going to operate the dam. And I don't know if you want to refer to his letter after this, but he's pretty clear about some of the challenges we've had there. So they're two separate issues. One is the dam remediation, the other one is the water and soil quality.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Corbeil, I'm wondering if you could just clarify, because Councillor Solda asked about MMS finances and what that society has been doing in the organization, but this money would not be allocated to that society. It is for the city. The city has taken over this project. Could you just comment on that?
Thank you. Yes, the city is operating this project directly, and my recommendation is that you allocate this budget amount specifically to do with the dam and the water and soil quality in the log pond. So it wouldn't then be available for McLean Mill Society or anybody else. And I have to say, McLean Mill Society had nothing to do with this project, and they've been helpful in responding to it. So this wouldn't, if you allocate this money, there won't be any leakage to other things at McLean Mill site. It's specific to this issue.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil?
I believe the CAO answered my question, which was about third-party liability insurance. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. So I understand this is an emergency situation, and it certainly to me seems like a necessary use of our contingency funds. Doesn't make it any less frustrating, and completely understanding that the work that was done by well-intentioned people who certainly didn't intend for anything like this to happen, and I'm sure have done all they can to help as well. I think that every time something comes up with McLean Mill or the steam train, I mean the steam train's not running right now, we have cruise ships coming, we could be asked for money still for that, there's this project, no matter what good people get involved in this project, there's always more money needed. And I think that this council is going to have a conversation at some point about if this is the best use of the money that we're spending every year, or what difference we could make to the rest of our community with this money. So not a conversation for tonight, and will be a very difficult conversation to have. I know a lot of people love the site. I see huge value in the site and in the train, but we just can't keep spending money forever. The only question that I have before we continue is the contingency. The only thing that I thought of when you requested to allocate all of the contingency fund is when we were doing our budget earlier this year, I remember the amount that we budgeted for snow removal to be very low relative to what we had already spent in the earlier part of the year, if I remember correctly, and I usually do. But we budgeted around 190,000 and we had already spent 170,000 in the beginning of the year. Do you know, I mean, we're close to the end of the year, but where does that leave us? Do we have other, if we exceed that budget, do we have other contingency funds available if we get a few big snow days?
So I'm going to give you a little half that answer, and then I'm going to ask the Director of Finance to give the correct other half.
Thank you.
So
she can correct my numbers if they're wrong.
We talk about snow budget pretty much every year, and when we have a bad snow year, we actually talk about, you know, we need to double our snow budget. But on the average, and we were just talking about this the other day with the works crew looking at budgets, on average, our budget is appropriate. Some years we overexpend, and some years we underexpend. So I wouldn't suggest we change the budget amount. But in terms of what happens if we overexpend, I think Ms. Rothwell can answer that.
Thank you.
Well, if we're consistent from year to year, we're under for many years or more years than we're over. And yes, last year was, I think, about $300,000 when we finally finished, or it was the year before. I don't remember exactly what. But yes, it was low. But there's years that we don't use all of it. We might even use just very little bit of it. And it goes into accumulated surplus. So we have the surplus available for when there is a bad snow year. Like Victoria budgets nothing, then they got a bunch of snow, and they have to, I don't know if they budget for snow, but it works that same way. You have this accumulation. You do, say, $200,000 a year. You use 50 of it for 5 years, and you've got, you know, a few $100,000 sitting in surplus.
That's great. Thanks. That's helpful to know. So we wouldn't need this money for snow removal and likely nothing else at this point in the year. Fingers crossed.
Yes, let's cross our fingers.
Thank you. 21 days. No more emergencies.
It's still our money. So if emergency arises and we need to have an emergency meeting of council and reallocate that money, you can do that. Okay. So it's still in our bank account.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? Councillor Haggard?
Again, just a comment, more of a question. You did make the state that these are very well-intentioned volunteers, but as Mayor Minion stated, this seems to be happening a lot. I think once we get through this process and get this finished, and we need to really look at, when we're looking at McLean Mill, we need to establish some kind of communication process or protocol. So if a group wants to do a certain work, they need to let us know that maybe we don't want you to touch the dam at this time, or get somebody out there to make sure you do it properly. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I overlooked having the motion read at the beginning, so would somebody like to read the motion? Councillor Solda.
I move that the report from the CAO dated December 3rd, 2018 be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni approve allocation of $200,000 from the 2018 contingency budget line into the operating reserve to be carried forward to 2019 from the McLean Mill Log Dam project, including dam repairs, water and soil quality testing, and if required, remediation of the log pond soil and water, and also look at our insurance to see if we can claim, and also into the grants.
I'll second that. Are there any further questions? All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Okay. Oh, item 6.1.
Yes. It's the late item, Madam Mayor, from the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, and it's a letter dated December 7th outlining requirements of the city in regards to the Catsuxis Creek Dam safety.
Thank you. Do any councillors have questions? We're on just this one right now. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder? No questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 7 from the Chief Administrative Officer, response to questions from Roland Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's 2 responses to 2 letters from Mr. Smith. One letter from Mr. Smith was dated October 2nd. That letter had a number of questions in it, 10 questions that we extracted. They were about 3 items. They were about fire department collective agreement matters, specifically retroactivity of salary. Second item was around the repayment of debt from the Bulldogs junior hockey team to the city. And the third item was around railway maintenance. So if council wishes, I can speak to any of those specific questions and responses.
Does council have any questions on either the letters or the CAO's responses? Councillor Solda?
So, Madam Mayor, maybe our CAO could give just a quick synopsis to the public, because some people don't have computers and that, and they don't see this paperwork. So maybe we could just take one letter at a time and just give us a quick one.
Sure. CAO.
Okay. So on the first question was regarding, I'll just bring it up on the screen. Regarding the collective agreement between the city and the IAFF Local 1667, who represent the city's firefighters. It points out that the wages, the salary rates inside the collective agreement do not extend beyond 2016, I believe, and asked the question why. And that's because the city didn't know the salaries beyond that date, because the city has agreed to pay a combination or an average of the salaries paid in Powell River and Campbell River, and we didn't know the salaries in both those communities beyond 2016, so we couldn't include that in the collective agreement document when that was written. And it goes on, I'm paraphrasing here, to say, is the city currently in a retroactivity situation? We have been up until virtually this moment. We just in the last few weeks, maybe last month, got collective agreement information from Campbell River beyond 2016. And so our staff are just now calculating the amount of retroactivity salary that is owed to firefighters. Question 2, Mr. Smith asked about the BC standard rate of pay for firefighters. Our response is the city doesn't subscribe to the notion that there is a standard BC rate. That explains the fact that basically the response points out what the hourly rates are. And again, they're based on Powell River and Campbell River. Question 3 is about the retroactivity piece. I just spoke to that. Question 4, is there a contingency plan in how to address retroactivity? Similar to the snow question that Director Rothwell just responded to. Retroactive salary costs are assigned retroactively to budgets from previous years when there was an under expenditure. And going forward, we budget 2.5% for each year in the city's budget. And that is the wage rate that is in the collective agreement until the end of 2019. Question 5 references a contract between the city of Port Alberni and the Alberni Valley Bulldogs hockey team. Questions about repayment of debt in the range of $55,000. And says, did the debt repayment plan begin as proposed and scheduled? Yes, it did. Have the payments been made regularly since in the full amounts? Yes, they have. What is the remaining amount of debt owed today? $37,928 as of October 19th. Question 8, Alberni Pacific Railway Track and Maintenance Program. The program called for $1.2 million of spending on maintenance over the 10-year life of the program. What amount of spending on bridge and track maintenance has been completed thus far in 2018? We've referred that question to McLean Mill Society for response. Question 9, is the city committed to each year's spending in the maintenance program as presented, or should the public expect less or more maintenance? And again, that question has been referred to McLean Mill Society. Question 10, can council confirm that all the spending identified in the bridge and track maintenance program is spending that does not include spending necessary for locomotive and rolling stock maintenance? And the response is that that track and maintenance program did not include any maintenance costs for locomotive or rolling stock maintenance. So there's the questions and the responses.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Councillor Washington, would you like to make the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the reports dated December 3, 2018 from the Chief Administrator Officer in response to Roland Smith's letters from October 2 and November 16 be received and forwarded to Mr. Smith.
Is there a seconder? Second? All in favor?
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to point out that the second letter, dated November 16th, asks a number of questions around the log pond and those issues we just spoke about. And the response report says the agenda package for today's meeting, December 10th, includes a report from the CAO on the McLean Mill Log Pond project, including supporting documentation. That report provides the information to which the city currently has access. Further response to the questions posed in Mr. Smith's November 16th letter cannot be provided at this time. So that is a response to those questions.
Thank you. And that was carried. Item 8 from the city clerk, tag day applications. We have a report dated December 5th, 2018 from the city clerk, including a chart of proposed tag day allocations for 2019 to be approved by resolution of city council. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council for the city of Port Alberni approve the 2019 tag day allocations as outlined.
Are there any, sorry, a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions from council? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And item 9, lease of property of Wallace Street. It's that council for, oh, sorry, no, Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motion?
Sure. I'd like to move that council for the city of Port Alberni authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a lease for part of right-of-way plan 858 RW with Wallace Street Properties Limited for a 5-year term commencing May the 1st, 2018 at the current annual rate of $1,284.30 plus applicable taxes.
Is there a seconder? And CAO, would you like to just briefly comment on this one?
So this is the Wallace Street parking lot. So the city owns a parking lot that's being used currently by a dental medical clinic, and they've used the city lot for quite a long time. It's a lease renewal. In renewing the lease, we added basically CPI increases for all the years since the last agreement was written. There was no increases in the last agreement, so we've increased by 2% per year, and in the new agreement we've added a 2%, I believe, lift in each year of the agreement.
Great.
Sorry? CPI increases. Sorry. So every year it'll go up with the consumer price indexing percentage. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions from council? All in favor? Carried. And item 10, Chief Administrative Officer, Council and Exempt Staff Remuneration. We have a report dated December 4th, 2018 from the CAO requesting council's consideration of proposed changes to the city's bylaw for mayor, council remuneration, and the exempt employee remuneration policy. CAO.
There's a topic nobody wants to talk about. So council may recall, some of you will recall that that after the Judy Rogers report in 2016, council directed a change in procedures. And at that time, our policy with regard to exempt employee salary increases, and I should say exempt employees are our employees who are non-unionized, or as I like to say, our employees who couldn't get into the union. So they, our unionized employees are obviously any increases is prescribed in the collective agreement. So it's common practice and among other local governments, and certainly it was here as well, that consumer price index increases from the previous year were applied to exempt salaries, and that on an infrequent basis, a municipality will go and check the marketplace, check with other comparator communities to kind of ground truth the salaries and see if they're actually where they ought to be, or if they're competitive, I guess. So in 2016, after the Rogers report, council changed that policy to say that every year the CAO would bring a report to council making a recommendation on increases for exempt employees, which we've done the last 2 years. And in each of the last 2 years, I've canvassed other comparator communities and found out that they've increased almost exclusively the salaries to exempt employees by an amount equal to consumer price index. So that's a standard practice out there. As you will recall, it's been problematic for us to have that conversation right in the middle of budget discussions, because that's when CPI comes out, so that we can't really do it until we don't know what other communities are doing until we get that data. So that's on the exempt piece. And on the council piece, which is even thornier, you get to vote on your own remuneration, which isn't fair, but it's just reality, right? And so we had a bylaw prior to Rogers that set out, well, even since Rogers, that set out the increments for each of the years of the term of the last council. But after Rogers, it was changed. Council directed that each year the CAO bring a report on council remuneration as well and make a recommendation. So in each of the last 2 years, council's had to, right in the middle of budget discussions, has had to consider your own increases to keep up with inflation and increases for exempt employees to keep up with inflation. And if we do the same thing again next year, unless you tell me differently, I'm going to canvass comparator communities and find out that by and large, they're increasing remuneration for council and exempt staff by the amount equal to consumer price index. So I'm suggesting that we make that change. So if I can give you my recommendations, I think that's probably the best way to go about explaining what I'm suggesting or asking you to do. On the exempt employee salaries, I'm asking that you direct staff to bring back a policy that states that exempt personnel salaries be increased effective January 1st of each year by a percentage equal to the BC Consumer Price Index from the previous year. That in the third year of each term of City Council, that the city undertake a marketplace review of exempt personnel salaries, and that the results of that review be considered by City Council. And that prior to the end of each calendar year, the CAO provide a report to Council requesting any resources deemed necessary for retention, and I would say reward as well, of exempt employees or adjustments to significant market comparators. So what I'm suggesting is that you put in place a structure that enables the things that need to happen. And that in each one of those, so certainly the second two bullets, Council would still help be the decider on those. And with regard to council remuneration, I'm asking that you direct staff to bring back a bylaw that says that council and mayor and council remuneration be increased effectively January 1st of each year by a percentage equal to BC Consumer Price Index from the previous year. And that in the third year of each term of council, the city undertake a review of mayor and council remuneration, and the results of that review be considered by council, and that any changes to mayor and council remuneration become effective January 1st of the year following a local government election. So in that way, there's really no way around you voting on increases for council. But by doing that, you would be voting on increases for the next council. And we're hoping that if you do it in the third year of a 4-year term, it's far enough into your term for you to have a good awareness of the issues, and it's far enough away from the next election that doesn't seem like you're voting on an increase for yourselves, which I know is problematic. And even this conversation is going to cause some chatter, and it just comes with the territory. And you can meet this issue head on right now, or you can not meet it head on, and we'll keep talking about it every year.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Solda.
So I'm kind of curious. I know you're talking about doing policy and all that right now, but I'm looking at dollar figures. Can you give me a rough estimate with all these increases and that, what it would cost the taxpayers, please?
I don't have a dollar figure, Madam Mayor, on what, I don't know what consumer price index will be. Last year it was 2.1. The year before, I think it was 1.7, or in that range. I don't know what it will be for 2018, which would apply in 2019. So I don't know what the percentage lift would be. And I don't have offhand the overall amount of money paid to exempt staff and council. I can tell you that the 5-year financial plan budgets for a 2% increase. So there's 2% projected in each of the the remaining 4 years of the 5-year plan.
May I? So if we vote on it tonight, I know we look at the budget coming up. We're going through another budget process, but that will be for 2000 and it won't be for the 2019 because that's been passed. Is that correct, or am I?
No, when you start looking at budget in January, it will be 2019 to 2023.
So why do we need to pass it tonight until we know what's the index will be?
We're changing a policy.
We're just going to change the policy?
What I'm suggesting is that you direct us to bring back a draft policy and a draft bylaw to do that. But and what I'm suggesting is you build a program, which is what I'm suggesting is happening in many other communities. And somehow we got ourselves into this position where I bring you a report every year and you struggle with it, and you don't want to say no to exempt employees, and you don't want to say yes to yourselves. And you're going to do that for the next 4 years if we stay on that path.
So the next text, when we come up to approve the taxes, we can say yay or nay at that particular time if we decide to go ahead with it. So in the meantime, this is just a policy.
Well, it's a policy, though, and a bylaw, but we would follow them. So it wouldn't be, during budget, we wouldn't come back and say, do you want to give an increase to yourselves and us again? Adopting a structure like this will prevent that conversation from happening.
I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There will be an adjustment to the wages mayor and council make as of January 1st due to federal government changes?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So effective January 1st, council won't get a lift in your remuneration because there's no bylaw to provide that. But what will change is that right now, I think 25 or 30% of your... A third of your remuneration is deemed not taxable. So it's being perceived as basically you recovering some costs that you've incurred doing the job. And Revenue Canada, the Revenue Agency, has changed the rules and said it's all taxable. So you're going to see a reduction in your net benefit for being on council. And none of you got into it for the money. There's not a lot of money there. But what you do get is going to be less because it's going to be fully taxed now. And previous council did strike a committee to look into this and got back a recommendation from the committee. And quite frankly, I think it was too close to the election for the council to consider it. It's a difficult topic. And so what I'm suggesting is that you put a structure in place so that this council and future councils just follow the system. And it'll take away that difficult decision making.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Solda?
I'm just kind of curious. We used to have a policy a few years back, and it was to go with the index. So what changed?
We got rid of it.
You got rid of it. Okay. That solved that one.
We got rid of it, yeah.
Was there... okay.
That's right. It was a recommendation of the Judy Rogers report, so we got rid of it for that reason.
The infamous one.
Madam Mayor, Rogers actually recommended, and it's in my report, if I can find it. She didn't recommend getting rid of the CPI. She made a recommendation that council or city retain legal counsel to review all exempt contracts, including, there was a bunch of bullets, but she said including policy on annual salary adjustments. So she didn't say stop doing CPI. She said review the policy. And so it wasn't a hard and fast recommendation from her that we go to the current model.
Okay, thank you.
So I have some comments. I think that there are a lot of pieces to the recommendations being made here, and starting with the recommendations for exempt staff. I agree with the first two parts of the recommendation. So I agree that CPI, rather than waiting beyond the budget season to look and see what other communities have done and then adjust either more or less, doesn't make sense. It's awkward to have to come back and budget for something that maybe was budgeted too much, maybe was budgeted not enough. It just adds a second step to the process that I think is not necessary if most communities are going with CPI. I think people should get cost of living increases, so I think that makes a lot of sense to add back to policy. I also think it's good practice for us to go out to market and find out what other communities are paying their exempt staff on a regular basis. And I think once per term is frequent enough to do that. It doesn't mean that increases will necessarily be made, but I think it's good practice for us to make sure that we're aware of what other exempt employees in other communities are paying. The third part of the recommendation, which is for the CAO to bring back a report to council at the end of every year, requesting any resources deemed necessary for retention of exempt employees, I don't agree with, and simply because I think it puts an expectation out there that every single year we, as a part of process, are going to be increasing certain employees' salaries. So I think it sets the expectation that at the end of every year, we're going to find an employee. And whether, I don't believe that this is what the CAO would do, but I think that that's what the public will feel, that we're going to find an employee to give a raise to, just to give a raise to someone. So I think if there is ever a situation where we need to retain a good employee, that should absolutely be brought to council, and we should have that conversation. And sometimes funds are needed for that, and sometimes they're not. But I don't think we should overlook that just because we don't have a policy. I just don't agree with the practice of normalizing it and making it an every year occurrence. And I also want to note that I think there's a lot more to employee retention, and which is what, the last part of the recommendation is based around. I think there's a lot more to employee retention than just salaries. And I think in this organization, we know that we have lost some employees because of workload, because people felt like they were not able to accomplish the goals that they set out to achieve, or the work that council put on them. And I think we need to be really cognizant of that moving forward, and possibly turn our minds to how we can improve that. And salary doesn't necessarily help people's work-life balance. So I'm definitely in support of the first two parts of the recommendation, but not the third personally. And then on mayor and council, I would agree with both. I think that, again, CPI, somebody said to me early in our term, because I think our last term we held our salaries the first year to zero. I don't remember why. We wanted to send a message, I'm sure. And somebody wrote us a letter and said, it's not good practice to hold your salaries to zero, because at the end of the day, down the road, you're just going to end up having higher increases to then match what other communities, or, to catch up to the cost of living. And it's good governance to have those level increases as you go based on something. So I definitely think that bringing that back to policy makes sense. And I think that the only way to have an impartial, somewhat impartial as you can get, change to council remuneration is to make it, I would almost say, at the midway point throughout council's term, so maybe after 2 years, so that it's far enough out that it is not considered our salaries or playing into whether or not we're running again. So I think those are good recommendations as well. Yes, I will move that we receive the report, and that council for the city of Port Alberni directs staff to draft a policy regarding exempt personnel salaries for consideration, including the first two of the CAO's recommendations and the council recommendations. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And would anybody like to comment on my comments? Because I did take one of the recommendations out, so everybody just agree. That's easy. No questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Carried. Sorry, opposed? Any opposed?
I was confused.
Well, you have to ask.
No, these motions were different than.
Well, I didn't read those motions.
This one here.
Oh my God.
On page 141.
Oh, in the report, the motions are a little bit different as well. But Tim just did that to confuse us.
I see.
Okay. Moving on. Doesn't matter. We're past it. Item 11, managers' reports, and there are none. On to bylaws. And the first one is the 5-year financial plan, 2018 to 2022, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4960-1. And this is just the final signing of a change that was made to the financial plan. Councillor Soldo, would you like to make that motion?
I'll move that the 5-year financial plan 2018-2022, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4960-1, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and numbered 4960-1.
Is there a seconder? Are there any questions? All in favor? Carried. And City Clerk, the verbal report from tonight's public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight's very lengthy public hearing at 6 p.m. with 4 members of the public in attendance. The applicant, A. Richards, is applying to amend the text of the zoning bylaw to facilitate the operation of a microbrewery in the C7 core business zone at 3141 3rd Avenue. The proposed amendment would apply to all properties within the city's C7 core business zone. The bylaw is zoning text amendment number T16, microbrewery in C7 core business, bylaw number 4974. The consulting planner presented the background report. There were 2 members of the public that did speak in favor of the application, suggesting that would revitalize the uptown area. And the public hearing was terminated at 6:08 p.m.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to move receipt of the verbal report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that the zoning text amendment number T16, microbrewery in C7 core business, bylaw number 4974, be read a 3rd time.
Oh, sorry. Receive the report first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one up.
That the verbal report of the public hearing held December 10th, 2018 regarding bylaw number 4974 be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions on the verbal report? All in favor? Carried. And Councillor Corbeil, do you want to continue?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that the zoning text amendment number T16, microbrewery in C7 core business, bylaw number 4974, be read a 3rd time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to correspondence for action. The first item is a letter dated November 24th, 2018 from Aaron Breivik regarding the possibility of a sponsorship program for crosswalk upgrades. Councillor Poon, would you like to make this motion?
I move that the letter dated November 24th, 2018 from Aaron Breivik regarding the possibility of a sponsorship program for crosswalk upgrades be received and referred to staff and the Advisory Traffic Committee for review and consideration.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? I just want to comment that I think this is a really interesting and great idea if people are interested. So thanks for bringing it forward. All in favor? Carried. And item 2, another letter from November 23rd, 2018 from Aaron Breivik regarding the format of Committee of the Whole meetings. Councillor Washington, would you like to move?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the letter dated November 23, 2018 from Eric Breivik regarding a format for the Committee of the Whole meetings be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any questions or comments? CAO.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Mr. Breivik, in his letter, expresses some concern that at the Committee of the Whole on retail cannabis, Council received a staff report prior to public input, and Mr. Breivik's expressed that he would have preferred that the public input be received and that staff consider that in their report to Council at a later date. And I would say that staff doesn't consider public input in staff reports to Council. Council considers public input. So as Council has just finished demonstrating, you don't rubber stamp staff reports. You consider them as one piece of information, and at a Committee of the Whole, you considered all that input and you considered a staff report. And the fact that you might have directed that action that looked like the staff report recommendations just shows that we have good staff. It doesn't mean that that we were predetermined. That's a staff report, not a Council report. So I don't. And to be honest, we did consider how do we not influence the conversation, but in my opinion, council needs to hear from their staff, and bring in a staff report. There's no easy way.
Yeah, we do need to hear from staff, and it frames the context for what the community is giving us input on at a meeting like that as well. When I read through Aaron's letter, I wondered if what he meant was, it seemed to me like he had the understanding that we heard from the public or we received the report, heard from the public, received it, and moved on as if we had made a decision. And I wondered if he had misunderstood our processes to think that we were adopting those recommendations. So I read through his letter a couple times because I wasn't clear on what he was getting at. But when I read it the last time, he said something in there about we should have a chance to hear from the professionals that we're paying if they want to follow up on anything that was said in the public. And so I think what he meant was that I think he thought that we adopted the recommendations at the committee of the whole. So it may just be a matter of not understanding our processes, which a lot of people in the public probably don't. And I think that's an important thing for us to recognize.
And we can do better at, or we can redouble our efforts to communicate what a committee of the whole actually is.
Yeah, and what receiving a report is rather than adopting a report.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Any more questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 3, a letter dated November 21st, 2018 from the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres requesting support to secure local venues for their Gathering Our Voices event taking place in Port Alberni on March 19th to 22nd, 2019, and a note that Community Investment Program application has been forwarded to them. Would Councillor Haggard like to make this motion?
Thank you. I move that the letter dated November 21st, 2018 from the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres requesting support to secure local venues for their Gathering Our Voices event taking place in Port Alberni on March 19th to 22nd, 2019 be received and staff directed to invite a late application to the Community Investment Program for consideration.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick comment. This is a huge event in our community, and I defy anybody right now to try and find accommodation for any of your relatives on that weekend in Port Alberni. But it's a huge event, and it's a good one for our community.
Any other questions? Okay, and thank you for that. This is a really exciting thing for our community to be hosting. We're really fortunate to be hosting some fantastic, huge events in the next year. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to showcase our community. And in this case, for a lot of Aboriginal youth to showcase themselves to people in our community. So it's very exciting. Any other questions? No? All in favor? Carried. And item 4 is a letter from the Port Alberni International Twinning Society advising that the society will be hosting a student delegation from Abashiri in January 2019 and requesting that the city fly the Abashiri flag during this time. And I will make that motion, that the letter from the Port Alberni International Twinning Society advising that the society will be hosting a student delegation from Abashiri in 2019 January be received, and council for the city of Port Alberni fly the Abashiri flag during this time, and also write a letter of congratulations to Mayor Mizzatini and thank him for the letter that he sent to us.
And I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Proclamations, there are none. So informational correspondence, City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few items. Minutes from the November 1st Air Quality Council meeting. A letter from Diabetes Canada providing information on diabetes and seeking to meet to discuss ways to prevent and reduce the burden of diabetes. An email from the Auditor General for Local Government providing information on upcoming performance audits. Letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing congratulating Mayor and Council on their recent election success and providing an information pamphlet on the foundational principles of responsible conduct. A letter from the Deputy Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, following up from a meeting at the UBCM regarding council's concerns in regards to the new overdose prevention site in Port Alberni and Island Health's RFP for a permanent service provider. They also provide contacts for the local community action team. A letter from the Office of the Seniors Advocate providing information about their organization. An email from Marilyn Hill regarding concerns over air quality and recycling practices. An email from Kathy Peters raising awareness to the growing pandemic of human-child sex trafficking. Minutes of the November 7th Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission meeting. And lastly, a letter from MP Gord Johns congratulating council on their election success and looking forward to meeting at an opportune time.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Councillor Paulson?
A letter from the Deputy Minister, Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, page 177. I found that the letter itself actually didn't really reflect the discussion that we had.
I found the same thing.
And the discussion that we had in face-to-face, and maybe we need to be better at recording what we say in those meetings, but the tone of the meeting, and please add if you will, but the tone of the meeting really was around the center that went in, and there was virtually zero or no public consultation or input from us as a body. And it went into a site on 3rd Avenue that may or may not be the right spot, but we had no input on that, and we made that clear in no uncertain terms when we met with the ministry that when things like this happen, we need to have a say in kind of what's going on, and the letter doesn't reflect that at all. It just, I found it kind of actually a little wishy-washy, but you might want to comment. Other councillors that were there?
Yeah, that was very much my thought on the letter as well, that it didn't really summarize the intent of the meeting, which was that we, and we specifically, because we talked about this before, because we had, somewhat varying opinions as a council on the overdose prevention site, we specifically did not go in for or against or to talk about the overdose prevention site in that way. We went in very much asking for public consultation and the community to be engaged before decisions are made. So, what that matters going forward at this point, I'm not sure, but I would agree with you on that letter. Councillor Washington, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
We can talk to Dr. Hasselback again.
That's right. Yes. Okay. There's a mover and a seconder. Any other questions or items that we want to pull out? Councillor Solda?
Yes, page 179, Marilyn Hill. She's got like 3 different things on this, and when she phoned me, I said, well, write a letter to mayor and council regarding all your concerns, right? So I would like whoever's representing, which councillor is representing
Councillor
Corbeil, maybe you could take the air quality concerns to the that group, and the recycling and that. There's still lots happening regarding recycling with the city and the regional district, so that's going to come eventually. But I do like her idea about talking on maybe on the tax, when we send out a newsletter, to add more information to that newsletter about recycling, just to let people be aware about what's happened, how do you go about recycling, and that, just some kind of little one word just to educate people. It would be, anyways, that's great, my concern.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, all in favor? Carried. Okay. There's no report from in camera today. And on to item L, council reports, and the first one being the mayor's report. And for anybody who has the agenda in front of them, you will see my written mayor's report submitted on time in the agenda this week with a few councillors, so this is very exciting. So I'm not going to read out my entire report because I assume councillors have read it already, and it's available to anyone in the public who would like to read it. I will just highlight the meetings that I had. So a coast forestry discussion, which was very educational, learning about initiatives that are going on and the direction happening for, hopefully that will be helpful to our community and some of our forestry companies going forward. We had a meeting with Island Corridor Foundation. I had a meeting with the Shelter Society to get information. I went to an Island Coastal Economic Trust, North Island Sunshine Coast Regional Advisory Committee, quite a name, committee meeting, and meeting with Scott Fraser that our council attended. I went to a community corrections office open house, and I will just highlight this one because I was invited to the open house, which was a Christmas open house for the people who work in the corrections office and in the courthouse. And I went, and they were like, "Oh, you came. We didn't expect you to come." But I had a really great conversation, and a comment was made that they always hear people in the community and on last council as well talking about how the problems are with the court system, and but nobody ever reaches out and says, tell us about the court system or tell us about what your jobs are in probations and that kind of thing. So it was a really great conversation about just ways we may be able to work together, and we are going to arrange a follow-up meeting, and I think I'll invite all of council to that because there's a lot there that I think could be valuable for council to be aware of. And other than that, I had a variety of meetings with local community members talking about opportunities for the community, and some of those are highlighted in my report. And that is my mayor's report. Does anyone have any questions?
Motion to receive the report.
Thank you. Second? Second. All in favor? Wonderful. And regional district report, Councillor Solda.
I actually did have my report handed in 2 minutes before, but it was such a long report, and so we had to, now we're going to do it verbal.
My fault.
So I just want to, the first meeting was the Alberni Valley Bamfield Service Committee meeting, and John McNabb is the chair and I'm the vice chair. We talked about the pool, which we discussed earlier, so I'm not going to go over that again regarding the pool. We just have a lot more meetings and a lot more public engagements. Oops, sorry. A lot of public engagement still to do regarding the pool. So I will leave that. And if the Parks and Rec director actually wrote down what the motion was regarding the ACRD and the pool. So that was a motion I made, and you can take a look at that. The other one was the ACRD board meeting, and Bob Cole from the Sprout Lake Community Association Quality Committee came and talked about, they have a lot of issues with Sprout Lake. There's invasive plants and fish and that shouldn't be at the lake, and of course that's affecting their water quality. So that is going to be looked at, and that's been an ongoing thing. This has not just happened overnight. So that there was a lot of discussion in it. The other one was regarding the Drag Racing Association, and that's dear heart to this whole community. And there is a proposal in the reading room, so council can go look at it at their pleasure. There's the Drag Racing Association's finding that there is they're having challenges having it in the city. Almost double the revenue has lost having it in the city. Barriers and fencing cost another $10,000. And the association spent in the total, so in the last 15 years, $94,000, close to $95,000 in road and parking improvements, et cetera, that helped the airport and other areas of the city. So now there's got to be a lot of discussion, and this motion has been referred to the Alberni committee, which is going to come up, and we're going to talk more about it. What are we going to do with the drag racers? So, and on another thing too that came up was John McNabb has been appointed to the 911 board, and I'm the alternate to that board because we have to vote at that particular time. They want to know who's going to be on the board. So the next one was the Alberni Valley Bamfield Service Committee meeting, another one regarding which is dear to everybody's heart, and that is the regional airport. There's a lot of discussion about the airport. There was a slide presentation which has been forwarded to all the council, and they're talking about, a lot of people have asked me, is it in full use? Is there lights up there? No, there's not. The lighting will be finished in 2019 because there's a lot of clearing that has to be happening, especially with the GPS and that. The GPS is in place, but it cannot be used until all the clearing of the trees and that have happened. There's areas that the trees have to be cleared. So they're also looking at an Alberni Valley Regional Advisory Committee, which will consist of several, the terms of reference have to be created first before we've decided where we're going to go with the committee. So that's basic in the nutshell. There's more information, and it's all in my report that's been sent to council, more detailed.
Do you want to touch on the landfill and
Sure.
compost conversation?
Yep. So we actually talked about the solid waste, and just so everybody knows, in 1970 is when the landfill was constructed, and there was no restriction at that time. You could just dump whatever you wanted, just like we did on our waterfront. The same thing was there. So now, because of the restriction with the government, you have to do this, you have to do that. So we're looking at more recycling, more different things that are happening. Just so you know, the property is not owned by the regional district, it's not owned by the city, it's owned by the province. We have an operating, we go by month to month right now. So we still have a long ways to go. Just also, there is a contingency fund. To close that landfill, you have to have so much money in there. So we are putting money away, and it's a lot of money to when that landfill closes. I believe we have about 99 years, maybe a little less now, left on that one. Where do I want to go? They have a lot of work still to do. They need to expand the landfill. We're running out of space, so there is space for it. But then again, you need the gravel, you need sand, and so we need to find that. And it's not going to be cheap. So we're still at that moment looking. So that's it right now.
And if I remember correctly, just to add to that, they are currently undergoing a study or gathering information around what compost service would look like, and exploring all options for in terms of contractors and working with the city and facilities and processing, and looking at that as a whole, because they do recognize that they need to deal with the methane at the landfill.
And that's a really big one. I mean,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Are there any questions of the regional district report? Councillor Corbier?
If I could just add to the landfill, a friend of mine was there just last week, and he identified a number of things that he couldn't believe were being tossed away. And I wonder if we've ever thought about a free store like a lot of communities have. And I mean, that would certainly go some way to prevent filling up the landfill as quick. And, you know, obviously it doesn't make sense to be throwing out stuff that has value still.
And illegal dumping as well, it would be helpful for. Councillor Soldo, you look like you have something to say.
I've toured it sounds weird, but I've toured a lot of landfills in the last 14 years. Some really amazing landfills. And yes, I've seen those stores. And I had brought it up a while back. And right now it's just the capacity. It's something to bring back, and we can bring that back, you know. And I'd like to see more things done at the landfill, and eventually they probably will happen. When you tour like Whistler, because Whistler doesn't have much space, but man, you look at their landfill, it's just amazing. Nanaimo has a great landfill, so does in Victoria area, the landfill there, you would never know you're standing on garbage. It's just amazing what they've done, so yeah.
Landfills seem to be an interest of yours, so that's great.
I don't know why. But
and there was, you know, conversation about what the next stage of the landfill looks like, so that could definitely be an opportunity. And there's been a lot of conversations over the last 4 years that we've been on council about reducing the amount of waste that we put in the landfill. And we saw a statistic at our first AVICC, I think, that the Alberni Valley Regional Landfill had the lowest diversion rate for Vancouver Island, meaning that we have the most waste per capita, basically, and we are not, getting as much garbage out of the landfill as most communities do. So a lot of good work has been done since then with recycling and with cardboard and drywall, and so a lot of exclusions have been made from what you can dump. But I think there's a lot more that can be done still. And Hornby Island has a great free store.
We'll get there.
Okay. Did somebody move and second the regional district report already? I think they did.
No.
No? Okay. So moved. Second? Second. All in favor? Carried. And council's reports. I'd like to first just thank Councillor Haggard, Councillor Corbeil, and Councillor Solda for submitting written reports by the deadline. No shame to those of you who didn't.
We're on the good list.
That's right. And we will start with Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll submit a written report for the next council meeting in point form and submit it to the city clerk as requested.
Councillor Haggard.
I do have my written report, but I'm just going to pull out one item, if I may. Meeting with the Ministry of Transportation regarding Cathedral Grove. Anybody that's driven through Cathedral Grove 8 months out of the year, you know how difficult it is for safety. So finally, after meeting with them for years through the Chamber of Commerce, they're finally listening. They're willing to do something, and they're taking a more collaborative approach this time and versus the last time when they tried to do something several years ago and it did not go over well. They did have an open house here a couple weeks ago that was very poorly attended. So I'd please ask everyone to go onto their website and have your input and ideas, because they are listening. This is going to be very important for us over the next year or so. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson.
Oh, I'm going to double whammy next meeting too, the point form. I really, I'll follow up next meeting, but just want to reinforce, if you haven't got your tickets for the Kazakhstan Switzerland game or the Kazakhstan Bulldogs game, there's only about 26 seats left for the Switzerland game, so get your tickets, come on out and have some fun, and support the Bulldogs.
That's great. Thank you. And Councillor Solda?
I already submitted.
Wonderful. And Councillor Corbeil?
I will be brief, because I did get mine in on time, unlike others. So on November 27th, I went to the Quispa LNG open house. That'll be a real game changer if that goes through. During, I think, the 52 months of construction, it'll employ up to 2,000 people, and then when at full capacity, it would create about 300 full-time jobs. And this is a big project. It's similar to size as the Kitimat LNG project. On the 28th, I went to the Island Corridor Foundation meeting, and again, pretty optimistic sounding. The new CEO by the name of Larry Stevenson seems to be quite high on Port Alberni for the port, for one, and also he reiterated several times that the scenic beauty of the track between Parksville and Port Alberni is spectacular. So hopefully something happens going forward there. And the air quality that was brought up on December 6th, I went to an air quality council meeting, and the big ticket item there, Vancouver Island University was driving around the city and outlying district in the summer, and they took a bunch of readings, and they're able to identify chemicals and particulate. And the methane was brought up. They did go out by the landfill. They'll be back in town late December, early January, again going around, and they'll be doing presentations to the community. I believe it's in February, March, and and it'll be finalized in April. So it's an interesting project. I asked the question if any, was there any permissible levels, higher than allowed, and it did not sound like it. There were some real spikes, like during the forest fire season, for example. It spiked like through the roof. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see when that's finalized. That's my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Poon.
I didn't get my report in on time, but I will update and submit it for next time.
Thank you. And I know I'm joking about the reports, but I have to say Wednesday at noon, or actually I think Tuesday at like 11 p.m. really did sneak up on me. So I understand it's difficult to get them in on time. You're not even thinking about council yet because we don't have our agendas. The agendas are what reminds us. So thank you to those of you who were able to submit them. And item M, new business. There is not any unless anyone has anything to bring forward. Nope. And question period. Come on up, Jim.
Do I have to say my name and address?
You do. You do.
Jim Del Rio, 2871 First Avenue. I heard something really positive here tonight, that you guys are actually going to take a hard look at McLean Mill. I'm probably going to get shot on the street for this, but it's time to quit beating a dead horse. I think we should keep the mill. It's very interesting as a site. I don't think it'll ever operate again. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the safety issues out there would kill you in price. Steam locomotive, it sits down there, it looks nice. They got that diesel. And a lot of the kids that come from other places, or even adults, they've never even been on a train. So they don't really care if it's steam or if it's diesel. So when I'm thinking that diesel, I know what it costs per trip to take that steam one out there. It's not cheap. And if you guys only got 5 or 6 people on it. So I moved here in 2004. I'm not a homegrown boy here. But I've heard McLean Mill, McLean Mill, McLean Mill since 2004. And I hope you guys have the balls, for lack of a different word, to actually do something. Whatever it is, I'm behind you, and now, like with Tim saying, it's going to cost just for that pond. Well, then drain the damn thing. Put a picture there, what it used to look like. People read all up and down Somas River. There are all those little plaques there, and they read about what was happening and what's this. And because the McLean Mill is great for like weddings, and keep it for that kind of stuff, low cost. And people will still go out and tour it to see that old equipment, but they don't have to see it running. I wouldn't want. I hadn't been out there for a long time, and I went out. 3-4 weeks ago maybe, and I thought, man, I'd never work in that mill. The way it's put together. And I think what you'll find too is when you guys talked about 3rd Avenue and the bad social media, most of the people that want the mill are the people that are against 3rd Avenue too. And we're all a bunch of old buggers. I mean, I'm an old bugger, but I'm not against 3rd Avenue. I think it's great. It's one of the most positive things we have in this town is 3rd Avenue, if we can get it right. But you talk to old timers here, why is the city council beaten? It's a great artisan type area. That's what I think. I think it's great up there. In fact, if I shop, I don't shop at big stores. They're American. I'm not anti-American. I just don't like giving my money. And I want to go into little shops where people actually say hello. And I think they got a really good thing going up there, and they got some really good people that are kind of ramrodding it. So congratulations to you guys for actually maybe taking a look at the mill. And that makes me happy, and I think it'll make a lot of taxpayers happy. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Neil?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just some clean up of some things that I'm still not sure what the answers are, and it's possible they have been responded to. But earlier on the year, there was a question asked by a citizen. I'm not sure whether it's proper to mention the name, but regarding a contractor that was hired, or a consultant rather, that was hired at the cost of 30, and believe it was maybe 40,000 eventually, to do some work for us, and I understand that the person asked that through the Freedom of Information Act for the information, and with some questions. I'm wondering if she had received this information.
Councillor, are we able to comment on that, City Clerk?
The information was provided to the person requesting the information, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you.
Was the question asked at a meeting at this mic?
No, I don't believe so.
So you would have sent the information. The reason I'm asking that is, excuse me, and this is not happening, and I believe it should. When someone is asking a question at this mic, excuse me, it's appropriate.
Just a little vodka.
When someone asks a question at this mic, and when it's necessary, and I understand it is necessary at times, to give the proper answer, you take some time. But I think at times the answer is already here, and for whatever reason, we have to wait 2 weeks. We wait for a whole meeting to ask a question. When that response is finally made, it should be made openly, and you did this this evening when you responded to someone's questions. It should be responded to. It's not by a letter to the person. Unfortunately, we have old business at the beginning of the meeting when it should actually come probably around the time of question period. So if someone disagrees with the response that's given, they have an opportunity to respond instead of waiting again to the end of the meeting. So I guess I still have questions regarding this expenditure. One I'd like to know is how much money is the staff allowed to spend without authorization for council? I understand that there has to be a need because emergencies come up that require a decision right now. I do understand that, but I'm not sure of the amounts.
So, CAO, do you want to comment? I'm sure you know how much money you're able to spend.
And who is able to spend it?
Madam Mayor, I can summarize, not tonight, I can summarize the city's purchasing policy, but I wouldn't want to get it wrong. So there'd be dollar amounts for different levels of managers.
Okay. Thank you. And do we have a mechanism for bringing that back?
That's my next question.
Okay.
Is on this particular, there was, I believe it was $30,000, and I just heard of this just during the elections. 30,000, that was added to 10,000, and I understand that maybe all of that wasn't paid to the contractor. But what his job was, and if you could give me that tonight specifically, I've got some vague idea, and what was accomplished by this contractor.
And so just to clarify, we are talking about John Van Dyke?
Yes, we are.
And so there was a report provided. We may be able to just find that report.
Yep, that report could be brought back to the next council meeting.
Yeah.
That it was reported here in a public meeting.
Okay.
What you're asking.
Okay, that's... So you'll report at the next meeting the expenditures that it's allowed by council. Did council know about this at the time it happened? Before it happened and when it happened?
No.
So this expenditure went through...
I can only speak for myself, I guess. I was not aware. I don't think that the rest of council was either. In this specific example.
Yes, that's all I'm asking.
Yes.
The mayor was aware of it?
CAO.
Madam Mayor, if we're talking about Mr. Van Dyke's retention as a contractor, there was two, I believe, two different contracts, and both were made within the scope of the city's purchasing policy. So within the permission council grants to staff, and within budget funds that council had approved for the purpose of retaining consultants. So there's nothing untoward with the engagement of Mr. Van Dyke.
I'm not suggesting there is, I'm just interested in how much we want. But what I am interested in is if an expenditure like that takes place, the reasons, and I'm concerned why it didn't get back to council. The mayor knew about it. I hope he did. Did he?
Again, Madam Mayor, the retention of that consultant was done within the scope of the purchasing policy that is approved by council, that it authorizes staff to make expenditures. So staff doesn't come to council for every expenditure, obviously. And the purchasing policy sets out at what point staff does have to come to council. So there was no need, there was no purpose for staff to consult council on
My
that.
question was, though, did the mayor at the time know about it? I know there may not be a need. My understanding is he did.
And I don't think I can answer that
and
question.
And then my other question, I don't want to pursue it because that's a little history, but I'm bringing it up because what happens in the past can reoccur in the future. And I think what's happened here wasn't appropriate. And that should have been mentioned. The council should be kept in the loop. And so that's all I'm asking now. But I do look forward to the numbers and what the expenditure. I believe it's $30,000. But how many times can you do that? So I appreciate you responding back on that. And just a comment. I also have a problem with the consumer price index automatically increase. I wish when I was working as a union member almost all my life that I was guaranteed a cost of living increase every year, especially on $150,000 and $120,000, $130,000 plus dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith. Come on up, Keith.
So I'm Keith Ambrose, 3147 on Second. And he raises a great issue, and I was concerned myself, and it's not that anything was done that was improper, it was a failure. It will be repeated, he's not wrong, unless we take steps to rectify that. So what was done, I wouldn't have paid for it, and I don't think we should have. So that's not what brought me here, though. There was the Uptown Merchants came up and spoke earlier. I joined that group, and I went to 2 meetings, and then a third sometime later on, just out of interest. And I realized right away that that group wasn't going to work out for me because I have 2 priorities as a citizen, as somebody who uses the Uptown Core. I live in the Uptown Core. I walk daily. I walk nightly. I was accosted on the way here. I'm the wrong guy to accost it. Luckily, I was late for the meeting. I didn't stick around to get dirty. Hopefully he's still there when I go home. So my 2 concerns are the garbage on the streets as a business person and as a citizen, the garbage on the streets, and then the human element to that we're suffering from all across town. I've noticed it's across town. It's not Southport. It's everywhere. A lot of businesses are suffering. I have a business that I have a public market, and I have an open gate policy like a public market requires. I'd be remiss to say that I've closed my market because of one reason. I'm closing my outdoor portion of my market. I'm changing my business structure to go a little more private so that I can meet and greet people at the door, and I can control what's going on in my business. I cannot do that with an open gate policy. When I take a walk up and down 3rd or up and down Argyle here, I see businesses suffering because their doors are open and they're welcoming, and all kinds of people come in, and I cannot mix some of the people that are on the street with the great clientele that I've built. I have a great clientele for my tiny little business. I'm going to privatize it a bit, not really privatize it, but I'm not going to, just throw out my doors wide open anymore. So people come because they know it's there, and I'm not going to struggle to find new clients. I'm going to deal with what I have and grow it a little bit at a time. That's because I've been really lucky with the people coming in there, with the street people. They have come in. I've been lucky my good customers have not been there. I've been lucky that it's not escalated into something. I've been lucky that I haven't lost customers over it. I simply cannot, as a business person, and go on and mix a social problem with a business. And I know Quality Food suffers. I was accosted on the way up here by a gentleman who accosts all kinds of people. He was hiding in the shadows. A woman might have crossed the road. I look for the fight. I'm sorry to say that. I build up energy and I just look to expend it one day. And I don't back down from a fight. So I was late to come here, so I chose, not to talk to the police chief tonight. I talk to you people. So it's a problem. It cannot be ignored, what's happening in Port Alberni. We cannot say we open a public bathroom on 3rd Avenue. Good luck to us. Good luck to us. Because we have to close that public bathroom at 5 o'clock when all the businessmen go home. I don't know how we could control a public bathroom. I've been in some. I don't go in public bathrooms, by the way, very often. I let my girlfriend out of the car because she wants to use the bathroom. It's always a disappointment to her because she can't use those public bathrooms. So it's not that we shouldn't have it. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting we're suffering in the downtown core and across Port Alberni, and all our businesses are suffering from some social ills, and they should be a priority. I don't like log-in trucks going up and down 3rd Avenue any more than anybody else does. 2nd Avenue won't be any better for them, an alternate route. We have a route. We have an industrial road where maybe we never get it complete, but we have one. And it works fine for all the trucks that are on it. It's just that we can't push log-in trucks past the APD where we need to. And I think the previous councils, 2 councils back, had a hand in that we weren't successful with that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for asking questions. I've noticed that this council's asking questions and you're looking for answers. And thank you for that, because the people are watching, and some of us are, well, like this gentleman said, or that gentleman said rather, that a lot of us are concerned about what happens out at that McLean Mill. A lot of us are concerned with our budget. Some of our problems that we're looking at now are going to be very, very expensive for us. We're going to have to do a better job somehow. Thank you anyhow. That's why I just want to say that. I'm not as optimistic as I should be for Port Alberni. I'm not giving up on Port Alberni, but if you look at, say, what Colson did to the Woodward's building or what Ms. Gaga did to the bank, I think we're heading that way a little. I think I have to fortify in order to be comfortable. That's why I closed my outside portion of my business. I can't leave $10,000 worth of product on the ground in my neighborhood and sleep at night. So all businesses are going to suffer if we got to get a handle on this. We can't mix the two. I certainly can't in my business. That's why I have to change the model. So I think a lot of businesses are going to have real trouble coming up here with what's happening on the street. And it's not about traffic. It's not. Traffic's a problem for sure. I don't mean any disrespect. It's not our biggest problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ellen?
Ellen Frood, 3082 3rd Avenue as a business address. Thanks again, Mayor and Council. I'm sorry you're seeing me so much tonight. I do echo some of the concerns about the people on the street. We see them coming into our drop-in center, which is located right up on 3rd. They're hungry, they're homeless. I speak with people daily who are choosing to live on the streets, to live rough. I see it all the time. We have people come to us because they're cold. They need socks. They need hats. People coming to us because they need a referral service to how do I get income assistance, or I've been trying to get my income assistance and they're not helping me and I'm totally frustrated and I'm going to get kicked out of my place because I have nowhere to go and I have no money. So we advocate and we work on behalf of people on the street, and we try really hard to make a difference in people's lives. So bringing people to 3rd Avenue and revitalizing is going to make a difference in how the city looks in the face of it. The housing that are coming to our community through BC Housing, through the current shelter, through the funding that we've received, through what Canadian Mental Health is proposing, what our First Nations people are proposing, that's in excess of 100, maybe 125 to 30 new housing units. So, we're making steps towards creating change in the community from a housing perspective. It's just going to take a little bit of time and lots of patience. on everybody's part. And I wasn't actually intending on standing and talking about that, to be quite honest with you. Rather, I wanted to address the letter from the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. I can't speak and address the RFP from Island Health, but I actually am co-chair of that community action team. So I actually wanted to speak about that a little bit and help you understand who's on that. So obviously Dr. Hasselback, our community health physician, is there, but we also have a physician who treats people and does what's called opioid agonist therapy. So that's the people that are taking Suboxone and methadone. So they're on treatment to help with their addictions. So they're representatives from mental health and that community, housing service providers. So the Alberni Shelter Society, Canadian Mental Health. We have somebody from the Schizophrenia Society. Salvation Army attends. INEO will attend sometimes. New Leaf, which is a rehabilitation place. So it's very representative of community members. And we're working right now to bring people with lived experience to participate on that committee, because what we do know is if we truly want to see action and change, that it comes through the people with lived experience who can tell us their stories. But most of all, I want to say that the city has been invited to come to the community action team table, and as co-chair of that committee, I resubmit an open invitation and would love to have somebody from City Council represented on that committee. It would be important to us, especially when there's a comment about an RFP and about community consultation. So I think the city's voice is really important there, along with people with lived experience and all of the others that are there. So the next meeting is Friday of this week, and it's from 1 till 3, and it's at the Rogers Street Mental Health Facility. And so, again, I can't say how important and meaningful it would be to have somebody from the city sitting at that table, along with all the other members of the team.
Thank you. So thank you for that. And just to let you know, Wes Hewitt invited me to come to it.
Oh, good.
And I know that we have Willa Thorpe, our Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, who sits at the table as well. And so I wasn't sure if it would be appropriate to have a councillor also.
Yeah.
But I would love to, if council is okay with that, attend the meetings.
And I think Willa, thankfully, has been very helpful in terms of Sharps boxes being installed at a number of different locations around the city. But it's more than that. And I think as the people that are governing and that, if you attend a conference and you hear comments, I would really love to have somebody from council attending. It would make, to me, it would be very impactful. So thank you for the consideration.
And it might even be something that each member of council wants to go to from time to time, or we rotate or something like that, so that everybody can get a better sense of what's going on and what the group is working on.
Absolutely.
So,
and we're looking to bring, we're doing community educational sessions. So, we'll be going out to smaller organizations like the service groups in the community. But anybody that wants to have a presentation made, we will do that. We're trying to bring somebody into the community for a very large community education in the new year. Not in March, obviously, but, so we're working real hard because we believe it's not just the work that we do sitting around a table, that part of our role is educating and not preaching to the converted. I know lots about it and I could talk about it forever. And, but it's not me that needs to learn. It's the members of the community, and we need to work to break stigma, to break barriers. And if we can't do that, and if we can't learn to look at the people that are street engaged through a lens, not by how we define, but their life, then we're never going to learn. Yeah. So thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to ask a question? All right. Would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.